Hello, lovely souls. Welcome to the Sacred Unweaving podcast with Hollie Hope, brought to you by the Beauty of Perspective, where we unravel sacred truths in order to weave a more embodied human experience. I am an author of the book, The Sacred Healing Drum, Divine Healing Wisdoms of the Feminine, the Earth, and Sound, as well as practicing for over 18 years as a master of integrative healing arts, co-creator with Spirit of the Sacred Perspective Healing Technique, and a master of sacred sound therapy. For more information, visit thebeautyperspective.com or follow on social media at Hollie Hope. That's HOLLIEHOPE. Today we are unweaving a particular type of psychic gift, and that is the spiritual gift of seeing, literally, non-physical beings. And while many of us aren't able to see as others do, a lot of times we can compare ourselves or think something's wrong or missing in our spiritual gifts as we aren't able to see these non-physical beings. So in this podcast episode, we will discover what blocks this gift, understand intuition on a deeper level, and real tools to connect in with your own spiritual gifts. So one of the number one questions I get is, how come I cannot see spirits? How do I open this gift? How do I allow this to flow through? Now, the biggest thing to remember when engaging in our spiritual gifts is that we all have access to all of the spiritual gifts. It's not as if one person came with the ability to have, do, or be something that nobody else gets to have, do, or be. When we talk about gifts and our role and our showing up in this human experience, our human experience is expansive. It's unlimited. Now, there are those of us who access these codexes, these talents, these traits, where things come a little bit easier. If we're going to go really, really deep into it, we can look at astrology, we can look at our chemical makeup, we can look at our ancestor lines to see how some people are more adept to have these gifts activate on their own, and others tend to have it shut down. Some of the things that shut us down we'll go over in just a little bit. But we all have access to these, and I like to think of the beautiful spiritual gifts as the sun. Some of us like to be out in the sun for multiple hours a day. We can't get enough sunshine. It is just our jam, and we love it and relish in it. Others of us spend a lot of our time in cooler climates, so there's less sunlight available because of our location, because of our environment or our circumstance. Or some of us are still in the whirlwind of 9 to 5, working a job, you come home, you feed the kids, and then the day is over and the sun is gone, and we don't get a lot of sunshine in our life because we're indoors for most of our life. Either way, we all have access to the same amount of sunshine, but our environment can limit our ability to access it. And we have to make a conscious effort to see the sun if we want to see it. Same way with our psychic gifts. We have to make a conscious effort to make our environment in a way that is conducive for us to activate those gifts. So if you find that you're having a hard time activating your gifts, check your life, check your regular routines and where you're placing your body. Is it in a space where spirits can come through and you are safe to see things and you are safe to feel things and experience the whole universe and God energy coming in through you and exploring with you and co-creating? Are you in a vessel that's allowing this nurturing to happen in order for the gift to grow, for those seeds to be planted and nurtured? Another way I like to look at it as well is when we go out in the sun, we live in a world of massive variety of skin tones and the way our skin responds to the sun. And this goes even beyond race because people in the same race may react to the sun a little bit differently. And so when we're out in the sun, if we are applying sunblock, copious amounts of it, the sun's rays are not going to access and connect in with us. Just like with our psychic gifts, if we're doing something to block and shield, then we're not going to automatically see that. Even if we say, ooh, I really want a suntan, but I don't want to burn, so I'm going to coat myself with sunblock, then what that's going to do is it's the same way with our spiritual gifts. Oh, I really want to see things, but I'm scared of what I might see, or I'm scared I'll get burned, or it'll be too much. So then we block ourselves without realizing we're even doing it. Other people may get a little burned and then tan. Other people just darken. Other people, they've had centuries of evolution and their skin can handle all of the sun all day long and never burn. And so it comes down to, yes, we all have our own personal makeup, but we also have these actions that we're doing that can limit our ability to open up a specific spiritual gift. Now, the spiritual gifts we're talking about today are the gift of sight and seeing things literally with your eyeballs. There are many, many different types of spiritual gifts, and I have a whole training available that is free for the public to explore your gifts. If you feel like you need that, you can check out my website, thebeautyofperspective.com. But for today, we are just talking about the gift of seeing spirits, that medium gift that we have. Now, if we have this gift and we're not activating it, then when we start to activate it, one of the very first things that happens is we get into this space of fear. And a lot of us had this gift and we've shut it down because of either trauma, abuse, or something traumatic that happened to us to cause us to shut down this gift. So for me, when I was a little girl, I could sense things and I would see things in my peripheral. Now, when we are seeing spirits, a lot of times it will happen in the peripheral side because when your 3D human eyeballs start to look at a focal point, they try to make sense of it and bring it into this reality. But we're wanting to see beings that are not in this 3D reality. And so the peripheral is one of your best places to start seeing things outside of this 3D physical into the non-physical world. Another thing you can do is you can soft focus. And my favorite exercise for this is to look up at the trees in the sunlight and watching the leaves dance. And I just kind of slightly blur my eyes and I allow any images to come through. I allow myself to utilize my imagination because our imagination is actually part of our intuition. When I was a little girl, I used to feel things and see things. And I would have these massive night terrors because I could see things in my peripheral. And if you have ever experienced this, you see kind of like a shadow, or you think you see something, you turn your head and nothing's there, right? Or you'll full on see a whole body walk through a room out of the corner of your eye, but then you look and nope, I'm just seeing things, is usually what we tell ourselves. Now, that happens because our 3D eyeballs need to make sense of what we're viewing. It's part of existing in this 3D reality. And so if something that is non-3D comes into play, our mind will quickly clear it out and clean it. And that it does it as an automatic default. And so until you build a skill of being able to look and perceive at things, you're going to find that looking directly at something, you're not going to see. It's in that sidelines. It's in the non-focused areas. So whether that's not focusing your eyes fully or seeing in the peripheral, that's usually how these gifts start. Now, when I was a little girl, I automatically would have these gifts open and I would keep seeing things out of the corner of my eyes and I could feel things. And I remember night after night after night, I would be in this state of panic because I grew up in a religious programming that taught bad spirits and good spirits come in. And if a bad spirit is there, you reach your hand out and you demand that they touch your hand. And if they touch your hand, they are evil because good spirits won't touch you. That was the lesson I had been taught, and that's what I fully believed. So I would spend countless times reaching my hand in the air, looking at my hand, seeing if it wiggled or moved just slightly, because I told myself if it moved slightly, that means a spirit is touching my hand right now. And I would go into these panics because I didn't know what was coming through. I could tell that I was in like a crowded room. It felt like a crowded room of people. And it became this panicking, fearful experience. And so, just like many, many, many of us, I did what we do for self-preservation and I shut it all down. And then years later, I couldn't figure out why I was the one person on the planet that God didn't speak to, the one person that wasn't gifted, the one person that couldn't pray and get an answer like everyone else. And it wasn't that something was wrong with me. It was that I was coating sunblock, putting on probably a full-on winter coat in the sunshine to make sure that nothing came through that was going to scare me or be unexplained or freak me out. Even if it was a loved one, that was still scary because they were dead. And so I blocked everything I could. And then when I was about 21, these gifts started opening up again. And I started to learn through my connection with spirit what the spiritual gifts actually were and start opening them. So a lot of the things I teach are just from my own experiences, and I get a lot of questions about my experiences. So that's kind of why we've created this podcast, is to be able to share some of these experiences. So if you feel like you're in the same boat, you can see, oh, you don't need big fancy words, and we don't need to go through all of this rigorous training in order to allow what is already in us to activate. And so I shut it down. And I shut down all of my gifts, but then as soon as I started to open them, I did notice a lot of darker things coming through. Things that didn't seem like they were love and light and angels. And what we all want when we want to see spirits is we want to see the beings that exist around us. We want to see those light beings. We want to see the ancestors and loved ones that have passed away. We want to see the angels and the ascended masters, and we want those beautiful, life-changing experiences that we hear about. Yet, when we start to open our gifts, sometimes the darkness comes through first, and then we shut it all down and we wonder what's wrong with us. Well, the truth is that when it comes to non-physical beings, and I use the term light and dark often, not good or evil, because we are in a world of duality where there's shadow and light, and shadow and light are both necessary in order for us to have a dual experience. Now, as we evolve and we ascend, we go more into oneness, but that oneness is achieved by honoring both the shadow and the light, like the yin and the yang. And so when I would dive into these experiences and I would start to open up my gifts, these dark things would start coming through. And the reason for the dark coming through is also the reason why we shut down the gift, which is also interesting because the darkness never asks for permission. So when we say, I want to see spirits, the spirits that don't honor permission, that connect in with all the fear that's already in us about what we might see, offers a bridge for them to connect in with. So what we're doing is we're actually creating the very thing we don't want by being fearful, by not being specific in who we are calling in or who we wish to see. And so we are allowing ourselves to invite in the dark beings. The light beings, they're ones of permission. They're ones of free will. They're not going to interfere. They're so high vibration that even if we're falling apart and feeling a mess, they're like, girl, you got this. Like, you're evolving. Look at you go. Oh, look how intense you feel this grief. Yeah, your human experience is going so well. You're feeling so deep. You're loving so wonderfully. And this is going to make you so strong, and you're going to evolve. Yeah, evolve, girl, evolve. And so when you have a higher perspective, you don't feel the pull to muddle. You don't feel like you need to intervene in these beautiful 3D humans, because there's no level of hierarchy, because it is all a delicious human experience. However, if you are a lower vibrational being, if you are in the shadow, meaning less enlightenment, or being that polarity to help create some of these experiences, oh, you're going to be all up in there muddling, feeding off of the energy, interacting, and having a hard time disconnecting and seeing that there is something higher coming, because you are in the space of the shadow as that being. And so when we start to open our gifts, if we're not specific on who we want to see, then we get whatever comes through. And usually it is the darkness, the heavy, the things we fear seeing that come through first, because that fear is louder than the desire to connect. And so we can curb this by focusing on sacred rituals before we open up to see things, or allowing ourselves to walk in a high vibrational sacred space continuously. That's my favorite, because then there's no drop and down and then up in high vibration and then down and then up into high vibration. Instead, we're constantly walking with spirit. We're constantly in a state of gratitude. You can also do a ritual where you burn sacred herbs, or you use beautiful Florida water for cleansing, where you're creating an environment that will allow the light, high vibrational beings to come through with clarity. Another thing that can block us from being able to see spiritual beings is not scheduling in the set aside dedicated time to allow them to come through. We live in a world of distraction and busyness and go, 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 and make sure you have this task and that task. And then when you're burnt out, go ahead and numb out. And then you go to bed And then I get this all the time, especially with people who their gifts have already started to activate and they do see things periodically, even though they don't always make sense, is they'll have disturbances in the night, like usually around 3 in the morning, which is the witching hour, where beings will show up and wake them up. And there's some frustration there because it's like, I want to see these beings, but I also really value my sleep. Well, the number one reason why that keeps happening is because time is not created during the waking hours to actually allow yourself to engage with non-physical beings. And so scheduling some time where there is no plan, there is just you in meditation, in your ceremonial space, there's no interruptions, and there's no agenda other than I am here to connect with anything that wants to connect. Now, if you are one of those people who gets woken up often in the night, one thing you can do is say, okay, I have scheduled this time at this day, this time, come through then. But you need to be quiet for now because I am sleeping. It's okay to engage that. Another thing that I was also taught was anytime a ghost or a spirit shows up, you are to cast them out. Now, this was a really interesting story because there was a time when my gifts of seeing were first opening up. The very first thing that happened with this is I went to my dear friend's crystal shop, Sacred Energy Empowerment Center. It just had opened at the time. And I saw a crystal that I had never seen before. It looked like a fish scale is what I called it. It was blue and greens and golds and whites and amber colored, and it was very metallic and reflective, and it's actually called labradorite. Many of you are familiar with this stone. And this stone is known as being one of psychic protection. But I knew very little about the stone, and I just fell in love with it. I took it home, and within that week, I had several experiences that freaked me out. So I was so freaked out because I would lay to go to sleep and I would notice a being present and I would open my eyes and I would see this huge, it looked like this cloudy, shadowy being. If you ever watched Care Bears, if you remember what Darkheart looked like, this dark cloud, that's what this being looked like. And they would be looming and hovering over me. And as soon as my 3D eyes would catch on and look, it would go away. So it was usually at the in-between stages between falling asleep and just waking up. I often would hear things in that time. And now that I've worked with the gift, I really love and value that time because it's the in-between time when your mind isn't as active to reinforce the 3D reality and it's able to experience other realities and dimensions all at the same time. So I had this experience with this being coming over me and it scared me so much. And I'm like, you know what? What's changed? Oh, it's that stone. And so I actually gave away my labradorite and it went away. The reason labradorite is so protective is because it allows us to see what is there. How can you fight something that you can't see? How can you understand something that you can't acknowledge? And so it allows us to have clarity by amplifying your psychic abilities so that you are able to be more protected because you have more information. Knowledge is power, and that's how it protects us. And of course, at the time, I don't really know this. And so I'm just going along living my life wondering that was weird, but let's just move on. Well, then I went through a really intense personal journey and basically my whole world unraveled and I lost everything and restarted again. And I was staying at my beautiful sister's home that her and her husband had built for their family. And their family grew so much so that they ended up moving away about an hour away. And the house was for sale, but wasn't selling. So I was in a place where I'd been told to move and I didn't know where to go. And it seemed like the perfect situation for me to go, live in this house, clean it up, show it, allow people to see and purchase it, and then I would figure out where I wanted to go with my children. And I was staying in this house, and it was interesting because my children were gone at their father's, and in the night, I continued to hear these sounds and like pots and pans banging in the attic. I started to smell weird smells that didn't have a source. And I started to like wake up in the night and I would see weird things. And it wasn't really making a lot of sense. And I was all alone in this space. Now, I have to tell you, this house, I love this home, and it was exactly perfect for my journey. And the reason it was because it was like the ultimate home to be surrounded by death. And I was in a space of death and rebirth. So I couldn't have picked a better place to let myself die and let some of my gifts be reborn. And this town was so small. The highway went right through the middle of it, and it was so small that there wasn't even a gas station. There was a small little post office that had 3 hours a day it was open, and there was some old gift shops that had gone out of business many, many years ago. And it was kind of just this little tiny bloop on the map that most of the time wouldn't even show up on your map. Now, to get to the house, you would go through this dirt road that had a circle around a cemetery. Now, the house was right on that dirt road. So right in front of the house, you had the driveway, a dirt road, and then the cemetery in front. If you go to the back of the house, you had the patio and then a mountainous hill that went up. And at the top of that hill was the boneyard, where people would drop their animals who had passed away, their livestock, their cattle, their horses. And so you literally had bones and death on both sides. So psychically, it was a really loud hot spot for things that had been stuck or had not transitioned, because it was kind of an old forgotten town, and this was an old forgotten space. Even though the house was new, the land was very old and had a lot of information in it. And so here I am at this dark town with death on both sides, and I'm hearing things, seeing things, and I'm really kind of at that, okay, now I remember why when I was a kid, I would pull the blankets over my head and just pray that things would go away. And I kind of want to pray that all this goes away. And so then I realized a dear friend of mine suggested, you know that stone you can't touch, that labradorite? Yes. Well, you need to go get one. And so I did. I went and got one, big old one, and I started sleeping with the labradorite. And as I worked with this stone, it allowed these sensations to intensify. And then as soon as I was able to interact with the beings that were there, the first thing I did was automatic default, which was kick them out. And I cast them out the way I had been trained and thought, yes, now my house will be nice and quiet and I will be the only energy that was there. Well, luckily I had a dear friend. She is actually the owner of Sacred Energy Empowerment Center. And I reached out to her because I kept kicking these things out and they kept just coming back and being stinkier and louder. And I'd put my crystals out to charge them, and then they would like manipulate them. And there's all kinds of crazy that was happening. And I thought I was losing my mind a little bit. And so I reached out and I'm explaining things to her. And she says, well, Hollie, you don't have to tell them to go. Just tell them not to make noise and stinky things. And I went, oh my goodness, that's it. Why am I dictating what gets to habitate this house? And why am I the one that's in charge and dominant over this space? If we're all moving towards oneness, can't we be roommates and exist in oneness? And so from then on, I actually created an arrangement with the beings, and that I didn't want them to wake me up in the night, and I didn't want them to make stinky stuff, but they are welcome to be here, and I will leave offerings for them, and I will celebrate them being here, and we can be here together. And it was actually a really beautiful experience in understanding the spiritual world and the beings that are in between, or the ones that pop into our reality and pop out of our reality, without knowing everything that exists or having all of the answers beyond this world, because I don't feel that any of us have all of the answers. But whatever the truth is for us that gives us joy and bliss, it's probably a good source to believe. And so for me, that really fit and that really resonated. And so as I continued to connect with these beings, I noticed that I didn't have to be the dictator of what they did. I didn't have to invoke control and block their own free will. I could make simple requests. And one of the beings actually came with me when I moved and lived for a few years in the new home I had. And there was a few times where my niece, who actually is very gifted as well, she saw one of the beings. I was like, oh my gosh, yeah, that's this one. Oh wow, you can see that too. And so it became this really beautiful exploration that I never would have expected. Now, I didn't share this story with that many people. I mean, now obviously I'm sharing, but at the time I didn't because I was worried that people would think I'd lost my mind. And, that's where we get into the comparison, believing that our gifts have to show up the way other people's gifts do, when in reality, they're just as unique to us as if we were an artist doing a painting. You can paint the same exact thing and have a room full of people looking at the same image, and they're going to paint something completely different. It doesn't mean anyone's wrong or right. It means that they're all different. And so the way our psychic gifts come through are going to be as unique to us as we are. Now, a lot of times we compare our gifts and we see somebody who has been working with their gifts and building a skill set for many, many years. And we start to believe that we don't have that same ability because of the work that they've put in that is now shown up as them having this proficiency versus us just barely learning. And it's important that we let that go and we shed that, because otherwise that's going to always block our gift. Now, the other thing that really gets confusing is when people say, well, what's the difference between like a gut feeling and a fear response or a trauma response? Because both exist in a response of the stomach. Now we're getting more into the gift of feeling rather than seeing. But when we see something, we're going to have a response in our stomach. So pay attention if you're just opening up your gifts of what your stomach is doing. The stomach is the part of the body that is the receiver and the processor. So as you receive other people's emotions and energies, it's going to try and process those. And when it can't process those, it's going to cause pain and discomfort in your own body. When we have emotions that we have undigested, that we haven't processed, then usually we get a lot of stomach ailments. And that's when we get into like the body work and things like that. But for today, we're just talking about specifically our intuition. That gut level intuitive knowing comes from the stomach center. Also, that's where your trauma response will react as well. But there are different sensations. And this is something I get asked a lot. What's the difference between intuition and fear response? Now, paying attention to the traumas you hold, paying attention to what it is that you've been carrying with you, or if you've had abuse in your past, know your own stories, know your own experiences. And not that we have to judge them or fix them, but if you know what you've been through and you're acknowledging it and paying attention to it, then you'll notice the difference between that sensation and the sensation of knowing. So intuition, that gut feeling, if you see something and then suddenly you have this gut feeling that tells you what that thing is, that's a confirmation. And we love that confirmation because that allows us to actually interpret and understand and have a context to what we're seeing. Now, when we're first opening our spiritual gifts, we see a spirit walk through our house. Sometimes we'll have a fear response, those cold, prickly chills, or a lurch in our stomach. Just the same, if we were to see a loved one that had passed away, that we held a lot of grief, we might feel that punch in the stomach. And so paying attention to the sensations of the stomach. Now, the stomach is a vast area with all kinds of sensations, many of which we just ignore and we don't even pay attention to what we feel because we have so much that's automatic in our stomach as we digest food there. However, pay attention to the different sensations. So a gut feeling is your intuition, where a fear response that feels like a punch in the stomach is not. It's a fear response. The intuition is always going to feel expansive, especially with yourself. Like you are expanding out. You are stepping more into your potency. You're stepping more into who you are. Where as a fear response of the stomach, you're going to feel a retraction from your own self. You're going to feel not just pulling away, because I've had the experiences where I go to interact with somebody new and like everything inside me is like, Hollie, fucking run. No, nope, 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 nope. Don't interact with this person. And so that doesn't feel like a punch in the stomach. That feels like a retraction. So the retraction I'm talking about is the retraction from self, where you feel disconnected from you. You start to doubt yourself. You start to feel confusion and overwhelmed. You start to be debilitated, no action forward. That is all fear response. That's a fear driving you, not your intuition driving you. Especially if you start to notice you're looking at other people to tell you what to do, you know that you have retracted from self. Because when you're in expansion of self, you already know everything to do. And even if you don't know, you're curious. You want to experiment. You're like, you know what? I could give it a go. I could give it a try. It doesn't matter because this is an experience and it's fully an experiment. And so as I'm experimenting, I can see, and it's not going to dictate if I'm loved. It's not going to dictate who I am. Bad things are not going to necessarily happen if I choose wrong. It's a matter of experiencing going forward. So that clarity is your intuition. The urge for action is your intuition. When we're operating with intuition and we do get a stop or a no or don't go any further, which I've gotten. I've had some really sacred experiences in jungles, on islands, and there's indigenous spaces that the public's not allowed to walk into. And even though I didn't know any of these spaces or where they were, I found out later because there was like a grove of trees and I was like, oh my gosh, the energy here is amazing. Wow, this is really intense. And I'm all by myself in the jungle just wandering. And I start to walk forward and I get this stop. And it's not a stop fear because a stop fear feels like stagnancy, feels like there's no movement. Like, okay, I'm stopped. What am I supposed to do? I don't know what to do. Why am I always questioning this? Man, I wish I was this. I wish I was that. Somebody tell me what to do. That all is fear. So this stop, it was more of a redirection. It was like, stop. This is not for you to go. Go over here instead. Stop. You should sit here and drum. Okay, I'll sit here and drum. There's always a redirective action going forward. So when it's your intuition, there's never a blank, no information, nothing in here, just sit and let it fester and be stagnant like a pond. Like that is not intuition. There may be a pause, something is coming, so you're actively waiting, but there is not a stop and spiral and look to somebody else to give you the answer. So that's kind of the difference between those sensations. So sometimes the action that we feel called to when we do get a stop or a redirection is an action to look at something that needs healing, which is still an action. We're looking at this unhealed part. I call triggers unhealed parts. So we're looking at this unhealed part or this thing that triggered us. We're looking at this fear that kicked in, and that is the redirective action to take at that moment. Now, when we go into a space of dwelling and obsessing, when we go into a space that is not facing and healing something, then we know we are operating out of the fear and not out of our intuitive knowing. And that fear and intuitive knowing are usually dancing back and forth in some realm because we're always going to be constantly healing something. We're reprogramming, we're rewiring, because the more education we get, the more experiences we have, the more we can evolve and choose into certain things, and the more we choose out of old programs. Or sometimes we experience something completely new and it activates new dormant DNA and programs that are within, and especially with the epigene that carries all of the emotions and experiences of your ancestors, those can pop in just because you're having a new experience, not because you're broken or you didn't deal with this 20 years ago. And so if something's not active, there's no reason to heal it. It's not going to come up. So when it does come up, it's a really great time to look at it because that's when it's actively influencing your life. And so when we can connect in with this intuition, then we're able to have that sense of knowing of if we're blocking our gift of seeing because we're blocking based on fear or based on our intuition. So connecting in with your gut feeling is actually going to help to open up your psychic gifts and your gift of seeing. A lot of times when we go into gifts of seeing, people will go through meditations where they leave their body and go somewhere else. In order to have a psychic or a spiritual experience. The really important thing to remember is that we are already these divine beings that were masters of alchemy and energy and frequency in order to exist in a human vessel. And since we are already masters in order to have this body, we already have all the answers, even though we have the blindness of the 3D reality. But without that, we couldn't experience 3D reality. We would just see how everything's connected to everything, and we would see all the layers all at once, and it would be a big mess. And we would miss out on the whole human experience. So allowing ourselves to have this gut feeling to connect in while we're seeing things allows us to have that experience be part of this 3D human experience rather than traveling in our minds and into the cosmos and coming back and not remembering things, or feeling like it was just an imaginative experience and not a full embodied experience. And so trusting that gut feeling. Now, when we do have blocks that come through and you get a stop or a redirect, one of the reasons why we doubt that redirect is because we feel like we are doubting ourselves and our ability, like, oh, I'm just not the type of person that sees things, or, oh, I just need to be better and then it will be more clear, or I'm not doing this right. That self-doubt will stop every time. If you think, well, who am I to be able to see things? Well, who are you to be able to see things? You're not going to see things, because even if you did, you would throw it away. Another thing that happens is we feel like we're being judgy, especially when we see things like connected with another person. You interact with a person, you're like, oh my goodness, do they know that they have like this really dark thing around them? Do they know that they are an energy succubus right now? Now, we may see these things and then we think instantly, oh my gosh, I'm so judgy. I'm labeling them and putting them in this box that may not even be them. But the truth is that information can be provided to offer judgment of preference. So if somebody isn't in alignment with me and I'm like, ooh, sorry, I don't play with that energy, I don't have to play with it. I don't have to go walk up to him and say, oh, do you know you have a dark being by you? And do you know you're like sucking the life force energy from other people? Nope, that's not my job. They didn't ask. So my job is to put myself in the spaces I want to be for the experiences I want to be. So if I interact with someone and they're not in that same alignment of what I want to experience, then I don't have to interact with them. I'm not judging them. I'm not putting them down. I'm going where the frequency matches. I'm going where the experience will call in more bliss for my experience. And if I know this person is not going to allow a blissful experience for me, I don't have to play. Permission. Isn't that great? And so allowing ourselves to let go of that judginess, allowing ourselves to let go of the unhealed parts is going to allow us to be more open. So to understand just in a really simple form how to connect with our gut intuition and what our body is telling us, because our body is a magical vessel and it knows way more than we give it credit for. And so allowing our body to be part of this experience will definitely help. And you can even use this as a very simple form of muscle testing for direction and guidance on what to give your body, and also understanding of what maybe you're feeling or what actions your body actually agrees with, or where your mind and body are in conflict and not on the same page. So I'll explain first and then I'll take you through the process. So what we'll do is we start with a breath and we connect with each of the energy centers of our body. Then we rise back up to our stomach. And I'll take you through that meditation in just a moment. And then when you get to your belly, you start to ask a series of questions. Now, the tricky part is that there are multiple ways to get yeses and nos. So if you're asking, for example, if a food or a supplement is something your body wants, you can hold it to your belly. You can ask, do we want this? And you'll feel your body expand forward, your belly as if reaching for the item, or retract back. So an expansion is a yes, and a retraction is a nope, that's not what I want right now. Now, this applies unless we are dealing with emotions. Now, if something is heavily emotionally charged, your belly may react. Even if it's a yes, you'll get a retraction. So if we have, for example, if I'm tuning in and I'm like, oh my gosh, is there a dark demon here that I'm seeing right now? And is this who I'm sensing? And I'm worked up into fear, then my belly is going to be like, oh my gosh, is it a demon? It's going to shrink in, it's going to retract, it's going to respond very intensely. So in that case, if it's emotionally charged, a no is no reaction. So that same flat line, that same, oh, we didn't go forward, we didn't go backward, we're just standing stationary in the middle. I didn't really feel a response from my belly. That's going to be a no. So for the belly, it's going to be either a yes forward, expanding, reaching for whatever. Like, oh, is there something here? Boom, yes forward. Okay, I'm reaching for it. We go towards things that are truth. We retract from things that are not truth. And this is why, even if something is dark or scary, a retraction can also be a yes, because we retract from things that are not for us. And if there's a negative emotion charged with this, we're retracting from the negative emotion. But the fact that we have this large negative emotion means that something is there and means that there's something to look at. So it's not a nope, move on. It's a yes, look at the thing. So we can ask ourselves questions like, is there a deep, dark demon that's here with me right now? And we might feel an expansive forward, yes. Or we might feel a massive retraction back, like, oh, no. But you'll notice that retraction back feels like a punch in the stomach. It doesn't feel like a simple no. So I recommend doing this exercise with both something that is emotionally charged and something that is non-emotionally charged, like a supplement, like holding a pen up to your belly and saying, should I eat this pen? Seeing what that feels like. And then, okay, no, don't eat the pen. It's not food. Okay, should I eat this apple? Does my body want this apple right now? Oh, yes. Do I want some water right now? Okay, cool. Because there's not going to be a lot of emotion around that. But then do something that's a little bit more emotionally charged, because that will allow you to see, well, what is a yes sensation when it is emotionally charged and I don't want the answer? Is it going to feel like a retraction because I don't want the answer because I'm in fear? Oh, yep, there's my unhealed parts talking. So pay attention with it and play with it a little bit, because then when you start to see things, you can start to use this belly intuition to understand it a little bit more, or to practice feeling the belly fear to understand that a little bit more, because the sensations are very different and it feels different in every body, but they're still different in every body. And sometimes the only way to recognize it is to allow yourself the space to experience it over and over and over again. Okay, so go ahead and get comfortable. If you are driving, probably not a good time to test this out, but don't close your eyes. And we're going to dive in and do this quick little meditation. So we're going to start by taking a nice deep breath in through our nose and out our mouth, uncrossing any arms or legs so that the circuits of your body don't have limitation and they're able to flow freely. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. In your mind's eye, taking your breath to the very top of your head, your crown. Breathing in, connecting with it, breathing out. As you breathe out, take your inner gaze to your third eye, your forehead. Breathing in, energy. Breathing out, dropping it down to your mouth and your throat. Breathing in to your heart space. Breathing in through that mouth. And dropping it down to your heart space. Breathing in through your solar plexus. Breathing in through your heart, drawing in the inner awareness, dropping it down to the solar plexus. Breathing in through that core center and dropping it down to the belly. Breathing in from the belly, letting it expand, feeling the airflow, dropping it down to the pelvis. Breathing in from the pelvis, dropping it down the legs. Breathing in through the legs, dropping it down to the feet. And then taking a nice breath here. In and out, dropping it down into the earth. As we breathe in, drawing your inner gaze up your legs and out at the legs. Drawing your inner gaze up from the legs to the pelvis. Dropping in through the pelvis. Drawing your inner gaze up to the belly. Dropping the inner gaze at the belly. Taking a nice breath here at the belly. Feeling it expand. connecting with your body. So much gratitude for this beautiful body, this vessel of wisdom and light and energy and delicious experiences. Feeling gratitude for this vessel. Now we get to ask our body any question we feel called to, whether it's intuition, whether it's non-emotionally charged, whether it's very simple, as if it's just asking your own name. Is my name Hollie? Is my name George? Seeing how your body responds, feeling an urge forward or a push backwards. And then perhaps ask something a little deeper. Do I have within me the gift of seeing non-physical beings, spirits, angels, whatever you feel called to? If I open this gift, will I see things I don't want to see? Noticing if your body expands or retracts because you're now having a fear response, or if it's neutral. And neutral is a nice no too. Then play with asking your body any other questions that you feel called to. And the more you work with this gift, the easier it is when you start to see things in the peripheral, to tune in with this belly energy and allow this belly energy to be something that guides you, because when the mind and the belly are connected, then we're able to understand, perceive, and activate so many parts of us we never knew were possible. Thank you for being part of this experience with me today. If you would like more information, feel free to visit thebeautyperspective.com or follow me on social media. There is a free Aligning Your Spiritual Gifts course that's currently available, so make sure you check that out on my website. Have a beautiful day, and thanks for listening.